because a lot of times Catholic and Orthodox apologists will try and make epistemic arguments against Protestantism rather than biblical arguments. And I'm trying to say, no, we're all in the same boat here, so let's actually focus on which denomination follows the scriptures more, because that's how St. John Chrysostom says you should determine which church is correct.
Right.
St. John Chrysostom says, suppose a heathen comes up to you and asks, there's many groups of Christians and you all claim to be speaking the truth, how do I know who to believe? John Chrysostom says, believe the scriptures, because these are simple and true. I suggest you do the same if you're trying to determine which denomination is most correct. But when people say Protestants are just relying on their own subjective interpretation of Scripture, here's what I would say.
So when people say that, like I've heard this, well, aren't you guys all your own pope? Like I've heard this pushback from my Eastern Orthodox brothers. You guys are just all your own pope. Not quite, okay? Because there's some issues with this, and Redeemed Zoomer does a great job breaking this down. Check this out.
People often frame it like this. Catholic and Orthodox apologists often frame the options as your personal interpretation of the Bible versus the Church Fathers' interpretation of the Bible, which you only get in their one true church.
Right.
So there's a few problems with this. Number one, it assumes that the Church Fathers, they all interpreted the Bible the same way, which they didn't. There were many schools of interpretation among the Church Fathers. There was the Alexandrian school that had a much more metaphorical interpretation of Scripture, and the Antiochene school, which had a much more literal interpretation of Scripture.
Yeah, Alexandria is in Egypt. They believe that Mark, who wrote the Gospel of Mark, was in that school and potentially founded that school in Egypt, Alexandria, Egypt, right? And then there's different streams of this. And I think, yes, trying to make the Church Fathers, presenting them in the sense that they're a monolith, would just imply that you haven't really sat with the Church Fathers, because there's diversity amongst the Church Fathers.